forward to taking this journey with you through these interviews. If you're trying to understand the Bible, through reading it, and living where you live, let's say in the Western world, and then when you go and you exist there, there's a different contextual experience you have that can deepen the understanding. So talk a little bit more about that.
Well, let me say first, I mean, we have sometimes the feeling that the Bible's a grab bag. It's whatever I want it to mean. It can mean anything I want. And so it doesn't really matter who it was written to or when it was written or where it was written. I'm applying it to my experience. Well, there's a devotional sense of application which is correct with that. But we can't get there until we understand that God chose a place and he chose a time. In the Bible it tells us, in the fullness of time, or at the right time, God sent his son to be born of a woman and be born under the law when that was in effect. It says he came to his own people. And so he was born as a Jew because God had chosen Abraham and his descendants, the Jewish people, to be the bearers of his revelation and to extend that to the world. So if you are going to get that message, you're going to have to go to them. And then, so he came as part of a whole line of promises made to them that they could expect one who would come, one who would be the seed of Abraham, one would be the line of David, one who would be, ultimately born in Bethlehem. All these promises were made, and he came to fulfill those. And so when we go to approach the Bible, we have to approach it on its own terms, not our terms. So I have to go back to that place. I have to go to that context, either by getting books to help me understand that, watching films like yours to help understand that, or to actually go there myself. And then we're in the place where we can put it all together and say, okay, now I can see things through the eyes of those who wrote the Bible, who lived the Bible. And once I understand it as they understood it, then I can take the next step. How should I understand it for myself?
Yeah. With all your experience and talking about evidence as it keeps mounting up over time, you've got a handbook on biblical archaeology. Can you tell us about that and what's it describe?
Well, in this particular case, I'm walking through the Bible, picking out verses that need explanation from the archaeological world. Again, trying to put the text back into a context so we can understand it better. And that's where we have not only places, but we also have artifacts that illustrate those places. I mean, some are very key because they will mention the names of people in the Bible, or they or relate to the historical figures in the Bible. For instance, when we talk about Jesus, the historical Jesus, he had a Roman trial, and so you have the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. We have inscriptions of Pontius Pilate that he left for us. We have the Jewish trial of Jesus, Joseph Caiaphas, and we have the ossuary or bone box of Caiaphas with his name on it. These are people related to Jesus personally.
Let's dig into that for a second. So in the bone box, and this is where maybe the debate comes in. From your point of view, you feel that it's very validating, the discovery of this bone box, but others might say, well, they're not convinced yet. So talk about both sides of that so we can see how these things are discussed.
I talk more in terms of plausibility than proof, because you'll never be able to prove things absolutely. I mean, there's some cases where there's just no doubt. We have the name of the place, you're digging there, it says it, what else could it be? With the Caiaphas issue, here we have a family tomb. We have obviously a wealthy family. There were 12 ossuaries or bone boxes where they put the bones of the people a year after their death in these boxes to make room for barrels in the regular niches. And one of those boxes is very ornate. It's carved with palmettes and rosettas and all kind of things that were very typical of someone of rank. In the box, there is the bones from carbon dating. We know someone about 60 years of age. And we know that written on the box, inscribed on it, is the name Joseph Caiaphas. There's two two inscriptions of that, spelled somewhat differently. And so we know from the New Testament there was a man named Caiaphas who was the high priest at the time of Jesus. We know that from Josephus Flavius, a first century Jewish historian, there was he writes about a man named Joseph Caiaphas, and so this Osher has both of those. So even though there's not a title that says high priest, and even though we don't have clear, direct evidence, there's nothing that, how could you in a case like this? But from the ancient world that we know, we have a lot of names, we have a lot of descriptions. There is no other Caiaphas that we can match to this. It's the only one we know. He was a wealthy man. He was a man of rank. He was an older man. All of this fits the picture.
Right.
So what evidence am I willing, to take to validate something in my mind? Well, I already come with the presupposition that we have an historical character named Caiaphas, and that he was there presiding over the Jewish trial of Jesus. He actually organized the plot against Jesus, we read. And by the way, ossuaries, these bone boxes, have a very narrow lifespan. I mean, they started maybe about 100 years before the time of Jesus and end, just shortly after that. So very, very short period of time. So we have something from the right time. We have someone with the right name. We have someone with the right, conditions in terms of the nature of this tomb. Why would I not then at least be plausible that this is the Joseph Caiaphas that was mentioned in the New Testament? Again, your presuppositions are brought to that, but I'm more predisposed to accept it than to reject it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a high level of likelihood here, right? So as compared to saying there's a remote possibility, I mean, this seems very plausible.
But again, why would someone not accept that evidence? Well, that would lead them to the historical Jesus and ultimately to the claims of that historical Jesus upon their own life, which might be very uncomfortable, not willing to want to go there or concede that or to be examined, in terms of their own faith. And so they would want as much as possible to try to make that evidence less than it could be in their case.
So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because they'd say, they're looking for reasons to deny it or to say that to invalidate. And I think if somebody were to come at it objectively, you could say, could you say this is 100% certain? No. Is it a very high degree of likelihood? I mean, there's so many pieces that would have to add up. The probability of it not being him, is very low, seemingly.
And I don't think people consciously come out to refute something. I mean, there are some where their career is built on a certain premise that they have to attack a contrary premise in order to retain, their standing, everything that they know and everything that they are.
Right.
And it is true. I mean, when we talk about Jesus, particularly Jesus, I mean, you can talk about Buddha, Confucius, anybody you want to in history, and it does not seem to have the same effect on people as Jesus does.
Right.
Because he's the only one that said, if you believe in me, you have eternal life. If you trust me, you take my word. No one else made those kind of claims. No one else claimed to rise from the dead. No one else claims, to be able to take you to heaven simply for believing in him and what he did on your behalf. And so there's, I think, in a certain level, I may not perceive for most people, there's a threat. And it's a challenge. So they are going to be more diligent about trying to unravel this than try to simply accept it. Right. And you'll see this. You'll see people who have faith. Most people come to me and say, well, I don't need that. I don't need to find that. I don't need to find anything. I'm fine. I just believe what I was told. And other people say, well, that's gullible, and you are someone who really can't be serious. But they are, because their faith does not require that amount of evidence in order to be confirmed.
Well, what's interesting is you had faith before you started in your career, but still got excited about and have eminently succeeded in a career that keeps building evidence. And it's not like you had maybe the need of it, but I guess somehow it still was stimulating to you.
Well, I mean, faith grows.
Yeah.
There was a time when I didn't have faith.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't believe.
Mm-hmm.
I started down a more scientific path.
Mm-hmm.
I was, there were a lot of things I could not explain.
Mm-hmm.
That I didn't know if I wanted to call them supernatural, but they were intriguing. But the Bible wasn't part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And when it became part of that, as I had someone challenge me to consider its claims and to believe, it took a while, but eventually I found that the Bible was trustworthy. And if the Bible is trustworthy, its message was trustworthy,
Right.
and therefore I could trust the one who gave that word, which was Jesus himself. That moved me into a whole different level in which there was a relationship. There are people. I remember the whole story about Albert Einstein's wife. They said, "Do you understand? Albert's theory of relativity and all that?" She said, "No, I don't." She said, "But I know Albert. He can be trusted." I say, I don't know everything
Right.
that there could be. I'll never have enough knowledge in all these various fields to be able to have to say I know absolutely for sure. But I've come to know the one who I believe is life, and who has spoken, and I think his word is true, and I've found that he can be trusted. So I don't have I come with that trusting factor when I come to his word. Now, there's a lot to understand, and I'm seeking to understand it,
Right.
and I try to. That's how my faith grows. As it starts very small, and experiences, especially in trusting God and seeing Him come through for me, testing me, and knowing that it actually is a test, and if I react correctly, I kind of grow even more.
Yeah.
And then all the evidences and things that I have. Evidence not just from archaeology, but from the general sciences and from other parts of life, give me, I guess, a firmer foundation than what I had. The foundation was enough to support me.
Right.
It's secure.
Right.
But it just gets more solid, and I feel that sense that, these things are true.
Yeah.
There was a philosopher named Francis Schaeffer. He talked about true truth. So in that sense, it's true, but it's true for me.
Right.
And it's objectively true, but it's also subjectively true
Yes.
in this case.
Yeah, so it's a faulty premise to think that science and faith are mutually exclusive things.
Well, let's take. Science is very much a changing discipline. You go back even 5 years in some science, and it's old hat. We know things are very different now.
Right.
The way people operated in the medieval period is barbaric, and the people, maybe 20 years from now will think things we do are barbaric.
Right.
And so our understanding of astronomy, we just don't know.
Right.
Recently we had an eclipse of the sun here. And you think, well, the sun is so big and the moon is so small, how in the world does it cover the whole sun? Well, the sun is 400 times larger than the earth, but the earth is 400 times closer, the moon is 400 times closer to the earth than the sun is.
Right.
And that proportion works just right, to make a solar eclipse. That's not observable everywhere in the universe, but it is here.
Right.
And for me, someone designed that. That's not a coincidence. It's an accident. It wouldn't work if it wasn't just right.
Right.
And so these kind of evidences that come all the time in the world we live in, from the sciences, continue to impress me that my faith is genuine.
That's it for this particular interview. Thanks for joining me. Really excited to take this ongoing journey with you as we keep bringing more content. If you haven't already, you really should subscribe to this channel. There's a lot of phenomenal content coming down the road into the future that you'll want to know about. Leave a comment down here. I think people would love to hear from you, and then you can hear from them too. If you liked it, go ahead and give a like. It only takes half a second, and share this with people that you care about. The world needs more light in it right now. So thanks for being with me. Hope to connect with you again soon.